Hey guys, it's Lane with Tim's Nation. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about the tournament I played in this past weekend. Sweets and Geeks in Medina, Ohio had an RTT. We had 10 people show up and play. And I was very fortunate that I did end up winning this one. So I came in first place on this one. There were two of us that were undefeated. And you're going to have to stick around to the end to find out how close it was between the two of us that are undefeated. But I want to talk through a little bit how I played, what the Army did. I want to talk through the specific games and the matchups just so you get an idea of how the DeathWatch played into those. If the list itself, I'm not going to go over the list here because in my list breakdown for this week's battle report, that's the exact same list that I ran. So it just so happens that today, in today's battle report, I'm playing the same list that I played at the tournament. So I'm not going to go through all the units here right now. All I'm going to do is talk through the different games we had. So first off, it was at, as I said, Sweets and Geeks in Medina, Ohio. If you've never been there, it's a really awesome store. They have a ton of candy there, but like international candy. If you've heard about those weird like Kit Kats that are like wheat flavored Kit Kats or wasabi Kit Kat, they have all that kind of stuff there. They have all sorts of candy that's American. They have international candy. They have a ton of it, but then they have a whole lot of other memorabilia. They have a whole lot of Dungeons and Dragons stuff, 40K stuff. They all have a lot of Lego stuff. They have a kiddie pool full of random Lego pieces, and you can just fill up a bag and buy the bag. So if you're into Lego, you have that. There's a ton of anime stuff, board games. It's gigantic. I'm still amazed that we have something that big in Medina. But if you ever have the chance to go there, I recommend it. They do tournaments and events for all sorts of different things. They do a 40K event, I think every other month. Michael Sensi runs as the TO for that, and he always runs a really smooth, clean event. So I always appreciate that. So this past weekend, I brought my DeathWatch, the DevWatch as we've been calling it, because it's what I've been tuning as far as a DevWatch army that puts out a ton of devastating wounds for one turn. My first matchup was into Jaden, and Jaden brought Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum. When he was bringing out his army, my initial thought was that it was essentially the perfect profile for me to do damage into. He had 5 big tanks, 4 Leman Russes, a Leman Russ tank commander, then 3 regular Leman Russes. He had the Rogel Dorn. He had a couple, some mortars and a couple of those artillery pieces, and then 2 of the Scout Sentinels, and then just a whole bunch of infantry. And I really, seeing that, could tell that with my list build, the 30 Stern Guard and the ability to do a whole lot of damage, I knew that in one turn, I'd be able to pick up 3 or 4 of his big tanks, and then the rest of the game, my Stern Guard would just probably dominate his regular Imperial Guard infantry, being that they're toughness 3, and they have a 5-up save. So the fact that all those Stern Guard bolters are strength 4 with AP 1, and the fact that those Stern Guard have 4 attacks apiece, meaning they're just going to outmatch those Imperial Guard in combat as well. And that is exactly what happened. Now in the game, I actually took fixed secondaries. The number of tanks he had, if I aced all of his tanks, I think I would have 21 points on Bring It Down. So I took Bring It Down, and he had 6 characters. And if I picked up 5 characters, I would max out Assassinate. So Assassinate and Bring It Down, what I took. The first turn, started off kind of cautious. I have a lot in Deep Strike. He moved a few things forward. I stepped out with my Dev Sense. They were pretty secure, but I was able to shoot the 2... the 2 Sentinels, the Scout Sentinels, able to pick them up. Turn 1, so not a whole lot happened. But then turn 2, I brought everything in. And as I predicted, just hit really hard. Picked up 3 of the Leman Russes. Got one of them down to 8 wounds. Then killed 20 to 30 guardsmen. And then just rolled from there. I was able to deep strike a lot of my stuff onto objectives in the mid board. And just dominated the primary. And just killed so efficiently. Again, it was very fortunate that his build was just a perfect victim for my DeathWatch, because all those Stern Guard, when they come in, sometimes when they come in, they hit really hard in the Tome of Ectoclade's turn where I reroll all hits and wounds. But after that, sometimes they struggle. But in this matchup, they just had perfect targets and going after those Imperial Guard, especially the guardsmen, the characters, because I took Assassinate. There was just 1 Leman Russ tank commander that I picked. The rest were just regular infantry characters, and I was able to shoot through those pretty quickly. key unit was the assault intercessors, the jump packs. These are great for assassinate because they can move their 12 inches and just pick up an Imperial Guard character. So Tech Priest Engine Seer is out there and he's got a lone op because he's near a tank. These guys don't care because they just jump in, take a wound or two off with shooting, take a couple wounds off with the impact mortals that they have, and then finish them off in close combat, giving me assassinate points. And similarly, they were able to get into the midfield objectives early for me before I could bring in the rest of my units. But really, yeah, just the volume of fire and damage output we have here. Now, Jaden, my opponent, was a really good sport. I think it's really important that if you're playing 40K competitively, casually, doesn't matter how, you always want to make sure that you're a good winner and a good loser. And he was a really good sport because I just absolutely hit him really hard. The score ended up being 100-22. I couldn't really take my foot off the gas because I wanted to score those secondaries, and I scored those secondaries because I took fixed ones by doing assassinate and bring it down, which meant I was just chewing through all his infantry, chewing through all his tanks. And as I said, I dropped into the midfield turn 2 and then just controlled all the midfield objectives from there. He had taken fixed as well. He took cleanse and engage in all fronts, and just my killing power is able to prevent him from really being able to score those. Real good sport, though. I really appreciate playing him, and still had a good time. And I'm not regretful of the fact that I kept pushing for that 100-point score there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Foreshadowing. We'll get back to that in a couple minutes here after the third game. So that was the first game. Second game, real interesting game. I played against Kevin. Kevin is a fantastic opponent to play against. He brought his orcs. Orcs are pretty good right now. He brought the Green Tide detachment, and his goal was to just bring all the boys, which he did. He brought 120 boys. So 6 20-man squads of orc boys. The Green Tide detachment gives all the boys a 5-up invuln all the time. They normally get it in the WOG, but now they get it all the time. So the fact that that many boys has a 5-up invuln is a big deal. It means it's tough to chew through. And he had, so the 120 boys, he had 3 war bosses, and he had 3 of the pain boys or pain bosses that give the unit a 5-up feel no pain. So 20 boys with a 5-up invuln and a 5-up feel no pain is difficult to chew through. In addition to that, he did have a 6-man brick of the Mega Knobs, and so one squad of Gretchen to stand back there and hold the deployment zone objective and generate CP. And Gaskull was out there all by himself, just ready to wreck. But that's it. Orcs in general and their codex have a lot of small utility pieces, what we might call trash pieces, things like Storm Boys or units of Grots, that sort of thing. Kevin just wanted to take all the boys. And as a result, he didn't have a lot of key little utility pieces to use. And it ended up that we pulled the mission... the ritual. This is the one where your deployment zone objective doesn't count for primaries. There's one objective in the middle, and then you plant objectives throughout the game. And because he didn't really bring any utility pieces, just these massive units of boys, he didn't end up planting any objectives during the game. He's more focused on pushing towards me and killing me, probably hoping to get to the couple objectives that I did plant. But man, this was a bloody battle. So I did go first. It's important when you're deploying. And an advantage to me on this one as well was the fact that it was hammer and anvil. And for an orc army that had no deep strike and no infiltrate, the fact that he did have to move a whole 24 inches across the table to get to my deployment zone definitely gave me an advantage. Although I did make it easy for him with the drop pods coming in turn 1. But so when you're deploying, it's important to remember what your opponent's army does. Typically, when I've got my Devastator Centurions, I put them in a corner behind a building, hidden really safe, because I have the ability to pick them up and put them down. I have the teleportarium strat with DeathWatch, so I can scoop them up and drop them down. And they only have a 4-inch move. However, looking at Kevin's orc all-boy list, he had no shooting. There were no guns other than the pistols that the orcs carried. So I put my Devastator Centurions right on the home field deployment zone objective, right out in the open. And I could see a couple different orc units with them. So I positioned them right out there, and that meant when I went first, they were able to shoot too. So turn 1, I went first. I decided, excuse me, decided we need to start killing orcs as fast as we can. Otherwise, these 120 boys are just going to run over me. So I did call Tome of Exclades turn 1. I brought in my drop pods. I placed them very strategically, putting the drop pods between the orcs and my stern guard that were getting out of the drop pods. So I had a little wall of 2 drop pods with their doors open and touching so that the orcs wouldn't be able to charge my stern guard right away, turn 1, and then dropped in the stern guard. With the drop pods turn 1, the Devastator Centurions stayed where they were. Their target was on an objective, so they didn't have to shoot at the tome target. They rerolled all their hits into a unit of boys, a 20-man break of boys. So this is where I found that the feel no pain is a big deal on these orc units. If they've got a pain boss in there that gives them a 5-up feel no pain, I probably should have, instead of going sustained in turn 1, probably should have tried to use my precision ability with DeathWatch and try and precision out some of these characters first, because slowing that would give me so much more damage output into these orcs if they weren't getting that feel no pain. But excuse me. So I was able to pick up 1 20-man brick of boys and the 2 characters associated with it. But my other tome target was 20 boys that I just wasn't even able to touch because I had to put a whole bunch of firepower into that. And obviously using the drop pods as a buffer between me and the orcs meant my stern guard were further back and were not in rapid fire range, so it's reducing my number of shots. However, the Devastator Centurions, remember I have 6 of them, and their weapons are, each one has a twin-linked las cannon, great. But then each one has a D3 shots blast missile launcher. The missile is strength 9, AP 2, D3 damage. So the big key word here when you're shooting at 20-man units is that it's blast. So the 6-man squad of Devastator Centurions, when they fire their missiles, get 6 D3 shots plus 24. Because of 20, you get 4 on the blast. So the Devastator Centurions were amazing at doing work into these big orc boy units. Again, they picked up a squad by themselves, a 20-man squad by themselves, which might not seem like a big deal. Remember, they have a 5-up invuln on them, so being able to chew through one of those helps reduce the number of orcs. I think I picked up 55 orcs turn 1. The Gladiator Reaper did some work on its own. So I think maybe 53, 55. Kevin was keeping track. So it was a very productive output there on turn 1. And as I said, his turn 1, when he came back into me, he really just got into the drop pods a little bit. So I felt like I had a significant advantage. A couple things interesting happens on turn 2. So I pulled deploy teleport homers, and I deep struck in my eradicators. I deep struck them into my opponent's deployment zone, and I had the eradicators just do deploy teleport homers and score me 5 points. They could have taken shots at the mega knobs. However, my concern was not so much killing the mega knobs as if he wanted to, he would have been able to come back and engage my eradicators. I knew that if he did that those mega knobs would pretty much be out of the game for the rest of the game because it would force them to go all the way back into a corner where I had placed the eradicators. So I decided to sacrifice the eradicators, sacrifice their shooting. In exchange, they were going to take the mega knobs for the most part out of the game. And it worked. The mega knobs came in. They weren't able to pick up all the eradicators because they are 3 wounds apiece. So they did need to get a lot of hits through. The mega knobs had the twin kill saws. So they were doing work, but they weren't getting rerolls of hits because he had the big mech and mega armor, not the war boss and mega armor on that unit. So wrecked half of my eradicators. The eradicators never got to shoot in this game, which is sad. But again, they pulled the mega knobs way back into his own corner when he charged them the next turn and essentially kept them out of the game until the very last turn. So I was happy with that trade-off there. They didn't do the damage, but they scored me 5 and then took out a big unit I was going to have trouble with. Now, in his turn, or in my next turn, he killed the drop pods that were blocking the way, but wasn't really engaged my units. I brought up one of my jump pack intercessor squads to maybe throw grenades, get in there, mix it up with the orcs. I shot the orcs, and Kevin had warned me about this. I shot a unit that was close to the jump pack intercessors. There's a stratagem that the Green Tide has where they can, after being shot, they can move. It's D6 inches. If there's at least 10 models in the unit, it's a full 6, and they can get into engagement range. So I had 3 Stern Guard squads lined up that were going to shoot that squad of Meganon, or regular boys. I shot them, and then they moved into engagement range with my assault intercessors and jump packs, and I couldn't shoot them anymore. So if that had not happened, it would have been over a lot sooner than that. But that made for a very interesting game when suddenly those guys, the Stern Guard, didn't have any other targets really to shoot at. So they were kind of useless for a turn. It was a tough, definitely keep in mind any counterplays your opponents may have, because it made things very difficult for me. Anyways, the rest of that game, Kevin was never able to put any, plan any objectives, because I had some small units like the Lieutenant with combi weapon. He was able to plant an objective. Some of the jump pack intercessors planted objectives. So I did have 2 over there. So I was able to score some primary. By the time Gascall got over, those assault intercessors with jump packs moved in, threw a grenade, finished them off, charged another unit, finished off a war boss. They did great. They were super utility in that game. They're a great subject for the grenade strat, just because they can get close, they can get within that 8 inches, and you can take advantage of it there. So it ended up, let's see here, 78-36. I had shut Kevin down pretty hard, but he held me back too. 78's not a huge high win, but very rare to have a game where you play against orcs, and orcs only score 5 points on primaries, and they had 150, 160 models on the table. So a very interesting game there. It was super bloody. By the end of round 2, both of us had maybe 500 or 600 points left on the table. Just absolutely slaughtered each other so fast. And then the third game, I played against Michael. Michael had he usually plays Tyranids or Genestealer Cult, but today he was bringing some Space Marines. He's bringing the Salamanders detachment. I forget, Flame Storm Assault Detachment Force, the Salamanders. And we had a great game. I made the mistake early on, turn 1, stepping my Devastators and Centurions out and shooting at a Land Raider, forgetting that he could get the Eradicators in, out, and shoot me back in my shooting phase, because they have that stratagem where embarked units can get out after their transport has been shot and shoot you back. So that was rough. I lost half of my Devastator Centurions there, and then in his turn he finished them off, so I lost them a lot earlier than I wanted to. So we had a great back and forth game. Definitely was able to still slap pretty hard in my Oath of Moment, or my Tome of Ectoclade's turn, and able to hit pretty hard. In the second turn, I picked up a Land Raider, a Redemptor, Dreadnought, 6 Plasma Inceptors, and 6 Eradicators. So it was a big hit back. Made for an interesting game. We finished it out 81-64. Again, those assault intercessors with jump pack came in super useful for engaging his skirmish units. He had like some infiltrators that he was using to hold midfield objectives. The fact that I was able to get in there with the assault intercessors and control those small engagements, and I was able to score primaries a little bit better. And yeah, again, had a great game. Finished, like I said, 81 for me, 64 for him. There were 2 of us that day that ended up being undefeated, because there were 10 players. It was me and Josh. And like I said, the reason I did not feel bad about throttling my turn 1 opponent and going for 100 when I clearly had the win is the fact that Josh and I were both undefeated, and I had just 4 more points than he did, overall battle points for the whole 3 games. So even though we were both undefeated, I did get first place because of 4 little points, which is why you should never take your foot off the gas in any games when you're playing in a competitive situation, because every point really adds up and matters. So was able to pull off the victory there. Got to spend a little bit of store credit. Had a fun time there. Great opponents, great event. If you can ever go to Sweets and Geeks in Medina for one of their tournaments, or just in general, it's an awesome place to go to. I highly recommend it. So DeathWatch had a good weekend, and we'll see how they do today in the Battle Port. All right, see you there.